Hello and welcome to the 13th book of the Iliad. Of the Odyssey. No, we aren't doing the Iliad in this class. That's the other epic course. That is the epic and the self, epic and the person. Instead, we're actually halfway through. We're starting at the midpoint. There is no middle chapter in 24. In even numbers, there could never be a middle, right? Because you've got an equal number on either side, so nothing is really in the middle. We would need 25 chapters to have or 23. So the midpoint of a work of 24 books is the space between books 12 and book 13. So that's where we've reached. And Homer shows how conscious he is of being at the midpoint, right? Because the last lines that we saw in book 12 are these. Odysseus has just finished his flashback. Okay, so the flashback takes us, so we start, as Horace says, in the first century, 700 years at least after Homer. He calls the structure of the Homeric epic, he describes it as beginning in medias res, in the beginning of things, rather than, as he put it, ab ovo, from the egg. Okay, so Homer has begun in the middle of things with Odysseus shipwrecked with Calypso. Okay, takes him forward a little bit until he reaches the Phaeacians, and then when he tells his story to the Phaeacians, we go to a flashback, and so now the stuff that happened before the midpoint is told by flashback, but now the flashback has reached the point where we came in. Okay, and so so Odysseus recognizes that fact and acknowledges it by saying, "Why tell this story?" He realizes that he's reaching the point that he's already told. Why tell the story? Already I have told it in your house yesterday to you and your goodly wife. It is hateful to me to tell over again a story that has been clearly told. Okay. Obviously, that's not quite the same as Dr. Holmes's lectures. He has no qualms about saying over and over and over again the same stupid story, the same dumb jokes, semester after semester, lecture after lecture. We continue then with book XIII, book 13, Lucky 13. And so he said, and they all became hushed in silence. Another thing that never happens in Dr. Holmes's classes. Or maybe it does. Maybe they're lulled to sleep by Dr. Holmes's monotone and his horrible habit of speaking of himself in the third person. And interrupting every tidbit with a sip of caffeine. So he said, and they all became hushed in silence. They were held in rapture through the shadowy halls. Okay. So Alcinous, the king of the Phaeacians, collects all the gifts from the noblemen, prepares a ship, and in this we see his extraordinary taking it to the next level of the laws of Xenia. Okay, he doesn't do the bare minimum like a Pharisee here. He doesn't go to the letter of the law. He takes it that one step further, as Jesus asked. So Odysseus says his farewells to the Phaeacians, and as soon as he's aboard ship, what happens? He falls asleep, and they can't even wake him up when he reaches home. He sails home. Of course, he's been exhausted, and so they gently place him on the shore, and he wakes up in that disconcerted state in which we often wake up coming out of the dream world and not really being sure where we are, especially if you are in a strange place, and that's what happens to Odysseus here. In the meantime, we switch to the divine scene in Mount Olympus, and Poseidon is beside himself and complaining to Zeus that Odysseus is being rewarded here by being by being allowed to come home, thanks to the Phaeacians, when in fact he should be punished for blinding the son of Poseidon. So he says, Father Zeus, line 127, I myself shall no longer be honored among the immortal gods when mortals do not respect me, the Phaeacians who are of my very own descent. For I just now said Odysseus would suffer many ills before he got home. That indeed is something that Poseidon keeps saying. And now that that solemn word of a god is being gainsaid here. That's not a good idea. So what does Poseidon do? How does he solve that? He takes it out on the Phaeacians. Okay. Now the Phaeacians, as we were just saying, have gone above and beyond the letter of the law of Xenia. The laws of Xenia say you must offer hospitality. They not only offer hospitality, but they offer a ship, a ride home, lavish gifts to Odysseus. And that's just not fair, says Poseidon, because he should be punished. Okay. Odysseus awakes. He does not recognize Ithaca. He takes an inventory of the gifts, and as he's doing that, Athena appears once again in disguise, this time as a shepherd, likening her body to a young man's, a feeder of sheep, line 222. All tender the way children of rulers are, right? They have soft hands, they have soft everything, right? Because they have soft lives. So the shepherd, Athena, in disguise, tells Odysseus that he is in Ithaca. Okay. And so, stranger, the name Ithaca has reached even to Troy, which they say is far off in the Achaean land. Odysseus now begins his deception. Okay. His very first act in his kingdom is to lie. To lie to a subject. Not to say who he is. He disguises his identity. Okay. Now that is contrary to the laws of Xenia, as we saw in when he was among the Phaeacians. But certainly understandable when you consider that that revealing who he was is precisely what got him trouble with Polyphemus in the first place. So he tells a false story, but notice how this is also a kind of a comment on the nature of epic literature and literature in general, right? Because one of the moral objections to literature from philosophers who hate literature, I'm not saying all philosophers do, but those philosophers who do, that was a restrictive clause there. That clause, that relative clause, was a restrictive clause. So there's no comma there. Okay. Those philosophers who dislike literature, who criticize literature, say that literature is not philosophical, is not moral, because poets tell lies. Okay, they talk about things that are not. Okay, which is the definition of a lie. But it's also the definition of fantasy, right? It's also the definition of some of the greatest works of art. And so here's a dilemma. So what's the moral situation? We can look at this. We don't have to, but we can look at this as a kind of a commentary on that aspect of literature. That Odysseus tells a story. He talks about himself in disguising ways, but it's a kind of a riddle. Or we might say a metaphor. It's a false story, but at the same time it's a true story, because every time he tells a story about himself and says, I'm a Cretan merchant or something like that, which is not true, the details really are true, because he talks about having lost everything, having suffered much. That is true. So even if he doesn't give his right name, the story that he gives of himself, in fact, is quite true. This is his story. He did not speak the truth, but he held back his story. Okay, the Homer makes sure that we're aware of that he's lying. I've heard of Ithaca even in broad Crete. Notice how well crafted that sentence is. He implies, without directly saying it, that he is from Crete. I killed the dear son of Idomeneus, swift-footed Ortilochus. Okay, why would you make up something that makes you a criminal? Okay, well, because that rationalizes, that explains why he is exiled now from Crete. I can't go back to Crete. That's why I'm wandering the earth, because I was banished for killing this guy. So he, as he's telling this, Athena doesn't let him go on thinking that she is just a simple shepherd. She reveals herself, and now Homer usually presents the idea of the disguises that God's put on as controlling the way they look by some kind of divine mist. And so she takes away the mist so that he can see her true divine form, but he can also see where he is, that in Ithaca, that he recognizes his home. Okay, and so, having revealed herself as Athena, she now helps Odysseus to plot his revenge, and uses that same mist now to disguise him. Okay, Odysseus. Now, of course, he's a geezer, right? So he has changed in 20 years, but he still has the physique of a demigod, which he is. He still has heroic build, but we want to downplay that. We want to make him look like a dirty beggar, and so she uses that form-changing mist to do just that. Okay, and so she says, "Go to the swineherd; he will receive you well." Okay. Well, we'll do a little bit more. That was book 13, and we'll move on to book 14 in our next exciting episode. So in the meantime, God bless you.